I'm very, very excited to present this conversation between two very important figures in the crypto art scene, in the art world in general, and specifically related to NFTs or scarce digital art or collectibles, you name it. Before I begin, I want to thank all the Bit Basel team, the organization, especially Annalise and Roger here that are helping us with the techie stuff. And because they are making a great effort to putting everything together. So I'm sure everyone is going to enjoy it. So let's get started. I'm going to for this conversation, I want you to present my friends here. First of all, I want to welcome Beatriz Helena Ramos. She's a visual artist. Having been a long-time entrepreneur, she is now transitioning to full-time social anarchist. Bea is the creator of Dada, the only yeah, I love the title. So Bea is the creator of Dada, the only visual conversation platform where people from all over the world speak to each other through drawings in spite of language, distance, nationality, or other artificial boundaries, and make collaborative art. The platform itself is a work of art. The Dada Collective live drawing performances have been shown at events and galleries around the world, including at the Tate Modern in London. Woo. Bea uses blockchain technology, economics, and governance as the basis for her work. And at the moment, she is focusing on a post-capitalist socio-economic system for data called the invisible economy, in which art making is separated from economic transactions, allowing artists to create and experiment freely while receiving a basic income for their contributions to the community. Thank you very much, Bea, for being here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, excited to talk.
Also, we have here today Jason Bailey. Jason is the founder of Artgnome. He's an art nerd covering art and technology at the blog artgnome.com and on the Dan Guerrero's podcast as well. Jason has a BA in studio art and art history from Framingham State University and an MFA in digital art from Massachusetts College of Art and Design. Jason is an advisor to blockchain art platforms like Dada.nyc and Portion.io. As serial entrepreneur, Jason has worked at startups in the Boston area on the cutting edge of technology for the last 20 years. Jason is mission-driven to use technology and data to improve the world's art historical record and to improve opportunities for artists from historically underserved or marginalized groups. Thank you very much, Jason, for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, and thanks for the great intro. So Bea is an anarchist and I'm an art nerd. I always thought my title was cool, but it's nowhere near as cool as hers.
No one can beat that one, I'm sure.
Jason, I love your hair. You look so cool now.
Yeah, I'm trying to do like the 70s Kenny Rogers kind of thing, you know?
You got it.
Very nice.
COVID version of Kenny Rogers.
Okay, so our topic for this talk is called crypto art. Crypto art, gold rush, or renaissance. And to start the conversation, I would like Bea to outline certain concerns about the general development of the crypto art space. An important note is we're already taking for granted that people that are listening, they already know a little bit what crypto art means. If not, we're going to share links to some more explanatory basics of what we're talking about. But let's start with Bea outlining the main concern that she's identifying the ecosystem, and perhaps later Jason can give us a counterbalance of his take on what's going on. So Bea, please go ahead.
Yeah, great. Well, I mean, it's great to have this conversation with you two because the three of us have been in the space from the very beginning. You know? So it's interesting to see how things evolve, and especially when you think about the excitement that we had 3 years ago, and how things have developed, which in many cases is very different to what we imagined. So And it's been only 3 years. It's incredible, the evolution of the space. So I think it's important to talk about these issues in depth. Not just issues, also the opportunities, the missed opportunities and the opportunities that are there, the trends, identify them, so that we can actually shape the ecosystem's evolution. Especially now that a lot of new people are coming on board on the crypto art space, and it's so exciting always when you get into the space. So some of the things I think that are important to talk about, that we have, with the work that we have been doing, have identified and have, pretty solid evidence of where the ecosystem is going in terms of economics, especially. So one of the things is the emphasis on money over art. So one thing is to talk about the NFT ecosystems in general, and a different thing to talk about the crypto art ecosystem, right? So one of the concerns that we have is that the space is very much developing in the direction of decentralized finance equals art, right? And so, or plus art. And so that in itself brings a lot of different issues. One is we are not really changing much in terms of the innovation that this space could bring about. I think one of the things that, the way I see it at least, is we don't really innovate in terms of technology, right? That's already been there, that's already been done, that's for the infrastructure, the Ethereum, and the other blockchains. What we can innovate is on the social layer, and also on the economic layer. And this is really new and unique to blockchain. And so what dApps can really bring innovation is on those two, the social, the economics, and the combination of the two, which will be, I think, governance, right? And the governance of value that is created. And I'm not seeing any innovation on that respect, because there are experiments, people use the technology, people launches tokens, and people tokenizes art and all of that, but the main dynamics and the structures that are in the systems are basically the same. The ideology is the same. It's sort of like you bring all the people from the art market and you put them here, use this technology, that's what they will do. And it's more an evolution of what they're already doing, which is a more efficient way of financialized art, which is even more dangerous. Well, at the same time, we're saying, well, this is a revolution. This is a new thing. We're leaving the art market behind. But it's not really the case. And so, more specifically, for instance, as you both know, recently, the analysis that we did on the secondary markets, it points out to a transfer of wealth from artists to collectors that is, because if you think about it in terms of, oh, great, now artists can get 10% royalties on the secondary markets that have been done before, and that's great. Of course, it's a big step ahead because there was nothing before. But when you think about it in terms of really changing the, we hate this like word of paradigm shift, right? But really changing the structures for the artists, then we're not really doing much, because basically the source of wealth of the artists are being transferred 90% to the collectors, and it's inevitable that at some point collectors will be creating more wealth than artists as a group. And if you add that platforms are actually charging artists, in the case of the one platform that we analyzed, that was Super Rare, thanks to them, because they actually gave the data, Super Rare did, because that's another myth. We all say that, all the data is out there, anyone can see it, anyone can analyze it, but it's not really true. It's hard to get the data on the blockchain. So Super Rare facilitated the data, and what we could see is that 80% of the value that super rare is capturing is being captured from artists and only 20% from collectors. And if you add the fact that the artists are transferring 90% of their sort of wealth to collectors, then you really can see the position of the artists as a group as a very, how would I say, it's the least that we can expect is that it's not going to change much. And in terms of, you know, really making sustainability for artists. And on top of that, and this will be the last one I will say, that, you know, so that we can start the conversation, is that these systems are what they're called star systems or winner-take-all markets, which means that only a few people can get to reap most of the rewards. And we have already seen that in the crypto art ecosystem, in which there are few collectors and a few artists who are basically reaping most of the sales and most of the rewards. So the extreme concentration of money, of wealth in the crypto art space is even more extreme than most countries. And so, you know, when you think about the way we think about it is in terms of systems, in terms of patterns, and stuff, in terms of structures. Like, of course, when you create a new market, new people are going to benefit. But what we need to see is, like, are the structures really changing? And the answer to that, it really is no. So I'll let Jason.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that was a really good foundation, Bea. And, you know, I tend to say that you and I agree on more things than we disagree with. I'll probably try to bring up some of the ones that we disagree with on, because it's makes for a better conversation, I think, than if we just agree on everything. But to start, you know, I'm always curious. I know that I'm a little bit of an unusual person, so I rarely take my own perspective for gospel, right? I try to find other signals to be like, what's actually going on here, and how are people perceiving this space, you know, regardless of what my experience is. So I threw a tweet out like 4 or 5 hours ago, a poll, and asked, is the crypto art market different than the traditional art market, ? And then the options were completely, slightly, not really. And we got 119 votes. And it's interesting. So about 40% of the people are saying they think it's completely different than the art market. And so 39%, 38% are saying they think it's slightly different. And 21% are saying not really at all different from the traditional art market, right? So, you know, one way to read that would be to say that regardless of how I feel about the space, less than 50% of people feel like this is really different from the traditional art market. Most people, you know, to some degree, think it's pretty similar. We're just recreating on some level what was already there. Where I think it starts to differ from the traditional art market, that the crypto art market, I think, as we all know, is sort of several different things right now, right? So if you go back to, so I would certainly consider Dada part of the crypto art market, right? But Dada has different rules from how super rare functions and different rules from how CryptoPunks initially functioned. I think when we talk about the crypto market, we need to qualify that we're talking, I think, largely about 2 or 3 markets. When most people are talking about crypto art marketing and critiquing it, they're talking about 2 or 3 markets that are particularly popular today, right? So like known origin, Rarible, super rare. There are a lot of other options out there, but if you go back and look at something like Rare Pepe Wallet, where a lot of these platforms started, it was run essentially by volunteers, right? So Joe Looney created this experimental interface where he was just driven. He likes to build things, and was driven to build something for the community. They took no percentage, and they tried to keep it the barriers to entry as low as possible. So unless it was like something like child porn or something that was like completely, I mean, there's some pretty controversial Pepes that made it through. So they really tried to keep the scientists really tried to keep the barriers low. in terms of what could come in. And to be honest, I think if you talk to Joe, when it got popular, that's why they shut it down, right? They saw like, oh, this is going to become commercial, right? So one question when I think about the history is how do we get back to some of the roots for these more commercial offerings as things scale up and become more popular? And is it possible? Their answer was shut it down, right? Which is kind of telling. Similar projects I think of as sort of early stage are like Matt and John with CryptoPunks, right? So there was no model to follow at the time. And, you know, you were talking about how there's a lack of experimentation in the use of the tech and the development of the social group. And I would agree, you know, when they came out, there was no template to kind of migrate toward, right? So they thought, well, let's just give away these 10,000, you know, punks and see if an economy emerges from it without knowing whether or not it would. And obviously it's, you know, now grown substantially, but we don't see a lot of people, again, the same way we don't see people adopting the Rare Pepe model of, you know, 0% cut or the punks model of just giving them all away free initially. And then I think Dada definitely successful in terms of bringing artists together from all around the world. But I don't know that we ever cracked, you know, and I say we because I think we had a lot of conversations about this, Bea, that we ever fully cracked how to bring on a lot of collectors to buy, you know, a lot of the work. So I think Dada was an example of a more fair way to try to sell some work to bring the money back to a community instead of to an individual artist. And I won't talk as much about this because I think it's your area of expertise. But it's just to say that, again, when you say it's 3 years and that's a short amount of time, it is a short amount of time, right? So it's not like we've had 20 years of like, you know, of the crypto art space looking like the traditional art world, right? It's really a fairly recent thing that we've got only a handful of folks that are starting to move up to the top and sell for more, right? And it was only last year at Rare AF2. So for folks that don't know, I kind of like bracket the history of crypto art based on Rare AF1, Rare AF2, Rare AF3, right? So it was literally 1 year ago that we all went to Rare AF2. It had none of the enthusiasm of Rare AF1 in terms of crowds, right? But the few people that did go, you knew they were there because they love this stuff, right? But we all kind of over beers and walking around, we're like, is this going to even be a thing next year? There's no collectors, right? So when we say that, you know, my pushback a little bit on things like, you know, if we look at the data, then it shows that, you know, the collectors will make more money than the artists. And we have to, I do think it's smart to look at these things and intervene. But I don't think, you know, if crypto is anything, and, you know, when we use these blockchains as part of the art markets that we develop, we're tied, whether we like it or not, to crypto. If crypto is anything, it's volatile, right? So I think everyone has to agree with that. If you look at Bitcoin or Ethereum, just in the last few weeks, there's a ton of volatility, right? And that volatility has found its way into the crypto art market as well. So I'm just hesitant to fully look at the last 6 to 9 months and say, okay, this is the way it's all going to go, because it's changed so dramatically in 3 years from those early projects to almost not existing at all a year ago, right? And I think for me, what I'm trying to figure out is how does crypto scale in a way that keeps the coolness of the culture and the creativity? And, you know, every day is somebody's first day with crypto, and I try to remind myself that, because a lot of times when I meet people in the crypto art world, I'm like, oh, it was so much cooler before. And that's like a lousy way to greet people into the community. Like, you know, between me and Bea, if you're a new person to this space, Bea is like, we're just reproducing the old art world. And I'm like, it was so much better before. And meanwhile, these people want to be like excited about this. There's aspects of this that are genuinely exciting, right? That can be saved. So how do we scale and embrace some of the popularity that I think is good in some ways, like when the Hollywood actors want to, you know, be part of it, and all, you know, we've got athletes now that want to be part of it. I don't think we necessarily have to reject that stuff, but how do we scale in a way that is fair to artists, which is where I think Bea and I overlap, but doesn't squash the growth and potential interest of collectors? And I'll say one thing, and then one more thing, and I'm going to shut up and try to catch some feedback from both of you guys, is a system that gives artists 100%, go back to the sort of the rare Pepe style, you could certainly build something like that, but without the incentives to bring in collectors, right? We don't have a market, right? So the question, I don't think anyone out there is saying, let's not be fair to artists. I think the thing that people are trying to balance is, where's that tipping point? It's not easy to get people to buy art. There's more artists and more artwork being produced out there than there are collectors to collect it, right? And you have to find a way to incentivize the collectors. Some just naturally like to buy art. Others are going to speculate. How do you get, to cut to the chase, I think it's how do you get to a dynamic that doesn't slow down interest from collectors so that there's actually enough income to come in for it to be meaningful to divide up. And then also make sure that you're dividing up in a way that can sustain artists. And I know you've done a lot of work on that, Bea, so I'm excited to have the conversation around that.
Yeah. I'll let Gus, if you want to jump in, and then I can.
Yeah, I maybe from what I get from what you just said, Jason, is that what I see is I wanted to ask you: do you think it's convenient, both of you, to separate what the platform of data is trying to do to separate the market value and economics incentives of artists from the pure intrinsic motivations? So I know Bea's take on this, because their model that they are trying to build, this is precisely at the core of the values, to try to make a distinction. I would like to know your opinion, Jason.
Yeah, so let me just try to repeat the question back to make sure that I fully understand.
So, do you think it's convenient to make that separation, that divorce between market and economic incentives and just the pure intrinsic motivations of artists, to make
yeah, so if I understand where Bea is going with her most recent research, it's that not that those things are separate, it's that they actually need to feed each other in an intelligent way to have a healthy ecosystem, right? But the way that I would look at it is, as someone who cares, my incentive here, or the thing that's interesting to me, is that I want more interesting art in my life on a daily basis. It's been the same incentive from like the first day I met Bea, right? So sometimes I talk about things in terms of what I think is good for the market or good for the community. But ultimately, if I think about what's good for me, and I just tell you what I think as we start to see some of the work sell for much higher prices, we start to see other artists genuinely shift their work a little bit more to resemble the work that sells for a lot of money. And sometimes it's egregious and obvious, right? And you can't always blame people. Not everybody has enough money to pay rent and eat food. And so if there's a gateway, to be able to make some more money by making your work look like someone else's work, so that can happen. As a collector and an art lover, that kind of stinks, because things start to become more homogenous, right? Which is sort of the opposite of what's exciting about art. Now that can happen egregiously, but more subtly, I think, with everyone, including me. And I've started to put together some artworks, which is in a way a positive thing about this space, that it is kind of rewarding that I can sell, not for a ton of money, but I can sell some works for some amount of money that shows me, and get some compliments back that shows me that there's some kind of audience for my work, which was a big problem when I was younger. So let's start with a positive, that it's great that there's an audience, but it certainly is subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, in my head, that am I making work that's going to be relevant to this audience, right? And a lot of people would say, what's wrong with that, Jason? In fact, someone in the community that doesn't necessarily like me has said, Jason, there's been patrons for art throughout all of history. The De Medicis, all these great works that we love in museums, those weren't made because the artist just felt like making them. It's not just work that was true to what they wanted to make. Those were made for somebody with an audience in mind, right? But my personal interest is when an artist gets the opportunity to just go off and follow their own direction. And I think that comes through in the work. And that's the work that I'm addicted to. And I don't have a great solution on how we build markets and communities that support that kind of work. But I think that's why I'm so interested in what Bea has to say. So I don't know if I fully answered your question.
Sure. I give total credit to Bea in this regard, because definitely she's successfully building a community that is focusing on on the experience of creating drawings and art. That's very valuable. And of course, I think that that's important when we have also the alternative, because I don't know how data would work if we didn't have super rare or variable, right? This is part of my question to data. So, Bea, do you think, like, as far as I understand your new model of monetization for the platform, you will need to go out on the market and sell and get collectors, right? You need revenue to build the platform. So do you think that that data would work in isolation outside of without contact with super rare or variable? I don't know.
Yes. I mean, first of all, this is not just my work, right? Like I'm just the driver of, like, the one that is saying, let's just look to, let's just change the mindset and imagine new places, right? Because when I hear you, Jason, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me, but it makes a lot of sense within a specific mindset, right? The mindset of thinking, well, there is not really any other option on the market. How do we make it work in the best way possible, right? But what is amazing, I mean, where I get really excited actually with blockchain is that we have now the tools to actually make new things, new economics, organize economics in a completely new way. That was impossible before. And we're not really taking advantage of that. Because why? Because it's actually extremely difficult to do. And it requires a lot of imagination. It requires a lot of unlearning things that we believe are true that are not necessarily true. And that's a whole work, right? So that is no longer a work that I'm doing by myself. It needs a whole community to do that. And we're doing it together. And it's amazing how, when you see the evolution of our mindsets changing, when we're already in a different place, thinking within different structures and the possibilities of that. And so that's something important to say. So for what you were saying, Jason, we also shut down. It's not that we didn't figure out how to bring collectors. It's that very early on, we decided not to sell. And even when we got the investment from Consensus and you were advising us and we were trying to figure out, 2 months after the investment, we had to tell Consensus, we're not gonna sell, we're not gonna go pursue revenues because we're gonna destroy everything that we've been doing. And so we have to stop and think and research and experiment and figure it out. And it's been 2 years since, and now it's incredible what we have been able to create so far. But one of the things that I think there are two important things from what we've been discussing. One is we don't need to depend on buying and selling art, much less financialize it. So if we don't want to go to the data extreme, which is like we may even get away with not selling art at all and still create value and revenues for the community, because that's what token economists do. Just a financial instrument. Let's say you just launch a token and it's a speculative asset. If you go beyond that and think about it in terms of you're creating your own money for a community, magic happens there. And so we may be able, we don't know yet, but we may be able to even create an ecosystem in which value is being distributed among everyone without selling art at all. But that is not probably what we're going to do in the beginning, because we think that there needs to be a transition. So to make the token economy work first, and then transition into that other place that we can't even see now. But the second thing is, if you don't think in those terms like that, and you think in more conventional terms, I think one important thing is to know that it doesn't have to be financialized. You can just buy and sell art, digital art, to people like Jason and me and Gus and so many people. You don't have to make it into financial instrument for speculation, which is what we're doing in the ecosystem right now, because that's what the whole entire blockchain is doing, right? DeFi. And so that I think is an important, even if you're a capitalist free market pundit, it doesn't have to be financialized. And that's, I think, an important point, because that's what the art market is today. It's just, yeah.
I have a question for you in this regard. So what is it about blockchain technology that allows you to build something different that wasn't possible before?
Yeah, so the amazing thing, think about it, like, so I give you the example of data. Data is a unique thing in the world, right? There is nothing like it. Online, offline. It's not a lot of people can say that. And, go in front of a Silicon Valley, investor and tell them, you've never seen anything like this. And they say yes, right? But the technology is just the normal technology. What we did was that we took the technology that was available for social media and we organized it in a different way that gave a different result. And so it's the same with blockchain. Now we have the opportunity to take the technology apart, to take the social layer apart, to take economics apart, all of that, like Legos in your table, and put it together back together in a way that is unique, in our case, to our community and our value. But it could be in a million different ways. The potential for experimentation is incredible here, because you can really completely deconstruct the ways we think in terms of economy and social interactions. So the main thing, I think, when it comes to art, and what is the center of what we're doing, is that this is 50 years of research done, is that extrinsic motivations are actually, if they don't kill creativity, they really diminish creativity, art, and innovation. So the insight that we are creating this entire economy from is that at the moment that you change, you replace the intrinsic motivations to someone who wants to create art for love, or who wants to collect art for love, at the moment that you change that for money, the intrinsic motivation diminish and sometimes completely disappear. And that in itself changes the mindset of people from ethical frameworks into transactional frameworks. And when you think about those two things together, there's a universe of problems that that are created simply by making, in our case, crypto art all about money and sales and leaderboards, and because the toxicity that we see in the space is not just that, people tend to say, well, when you're successful, the internet is gonna go against you, haters are gonna hate. No, it is actually embedded within the incentives and the culture that you're creating. Which is why in data, we don't have any of that. And we're gonna have an economy, we already know it for sure. I mean, we have to prove it, but we already know that we have such a solid foundations that we know that when we launch the economy, we're not going to have any of those problems because we don't have those incentives, right? So, so in terms of how could you, your question, Jason, is like, well, let's think about incentives. Let's think about what incentivizes you. You think that you're alone in the world? Of course not. And there are so many people like you who just love art, who will love to support communities of artists, who will feel really like we feel intrinsic rewards just to know that your time and your resources, whether they are monetary or they are your skills, that are going into something that is making people's life better for real, empowering them for real. And so that's enough, for people to just do stuff. And so when we think about collectors, we don't think about collectors, we think about Jason. You're a collector, you're an artist, you're a wonderful human being. And we want to make sure that there is an environment for you to thrive.
But
in whatever way.
Jason is non-fungible.
Exactly, and none of us, right? But the thing is that it's universal. So one thing that we're doing, and this is recent, now that we're actually working on the system itself, is that all the systems are what they call agent-based systems, right? So they talk about agents and in different roles. So Jason will be an agent, a collector, and I may be an agent as a developer, and Gus will be an agent as an artist.
Yeah, I think your connection, Bea, your connection there is a little bit weak.
A collector or an artist. So
Bea, I think we are losing you a little bit there. But what I understand of what Bea is saying right now is that they are creating different roles, right? Different roles for different people on the community. Am I right?
No, the opposite. The opposite.
Okay.
Like systems are based on agents and roles, and we're saying there's no agents in our system and no roles. What there is needs, universal needs, right? We all have them. It doesn't matter what we do. And what are the actions that could fulfill those needs? And the action in itself is the reward. So for somebody like Jason, if he wants to connect, or if he wants to just feel good because by looking at art, well, the action will be either to draw, in the case of data, with somebody on the platform, or collect some piece of art, but in a way where the incentives are in such way that he will actually be fulfilled. Because we're not necessarily fulfilled in our intrinsic rewards when somebody buys our work. We're fulfilled when somebody who loves our work gets it and tells us, and we feel it, right? Those are two different things. And so if you can align those incentives and create an ecosystem about like that, then we will have a completely different society if you think about it. So, and this is an opportunity to do many different experiments when it comes to.
And perhaps the fulfillment doesn't have to be inside just one single platform, right? Like that fulfillment comes, or people can get that fulfillment. But by the way I see my fellow artists, friends that are way more productive, and they are just playing everywhere. They are trying all the platforms. I wish I was that productive to do the same.
That's a good point. It's a good point because it's one of the beautiful things about decentralization is that it doesn't make it that by itself, it doesn't make it necessarily to go into monopolies, into platforms wanted to capture people and make it exclusive. Is the fact that everyone is in every platform that makes it so incredible and vibrant, right? The problem, though, is that all the platforms, all the ecosystem, aside from the early experiments, are just one way of doing things. They're all the same. And so it's not that you have really options. What I think it does is that it creates an entire community, because you meet everyone in different places and you have different connections in different, it's different to hang out in data than then see you in crypto boxes, right?
So let me ask something related to this to Jason. So you mentioned in one of your articles that in order for an artist to be financially successful, it basically goes down to a popularity contest, right? Am I right?
Yep.
So my question would be, so that will mean that the traditional art market or most of the platforms that we are seeing in where artists definitely get more economic reward, but being more popular, that's less of an artistic endeavor compared to what people are doing in data? What could you say about that?
Yeah, so I think there's, and I think Bea and I agree on this aspect. There's two ways to look at art, and people don't separate them. Well, there's more than two, but there's two distinct ones that are important to separate that people don't separate, which is the financial value and, for lack of a better description, what I would call the emotional value, right? And I think it's unquestionable that today, and I'm not sure, if this will change. It sounds like it might with the future of data, but that today the financial value of art is dictated by other people's desire to own it, right? That doesn't sound like it's all that revolutionary, but I think we have to agree on some building blocks, right? So when people want to own your work, if one person wants to own it, it has a certain value. If two people want to own it, they compete with each other sometimes, and that drives up the value. So I did this 6 months research paper for the Harvard Data Analytics website, and the biggest thing that I learned from talking to the folks at Christie's that are managing their machine learning division is that the thing that drives up the value of art the most, beyond the artist that actually created it, is how many bidders there are for the work, right? So when we're talking about financial value of artworks, right, and what drives them up, the value, financial value, it's how many people out there want to buy it from you, which shouldn't be that surprising when you say it that way, right? Now,
Offer and demand.
So how do you get to where more people want to compete with each other to buy your work? You get in front of a larger audience, more people are familiar with it, they see that other people have bought that work, right? So I'm not condoning this. This is just, when I drop a rock, it hits the ground. These are just kind of like, the laws of past systems and how they've functioned, right? Now, separate from that, there's like the value of art that's completely divorced from the financial, like what people want to pay for it, right? Which is, and I've sort of got this pyramid that I build where I think at the base is this value of creating art, right? So forget any transaction whatsoever. So many people in my life, including myself, have gone through really difficult times, and it's through the process of making, right? Not even if maybe no one ever even sees the work. That to me is the highest level of value you can extract from art. The second level on the pyramid, right, is being able to share sort of through your art another way to look at the world, this other lens, a way to have shared experience that goes back thousands of years, right? So we can go through all of history and see how our collective grandfathers and grandmothers, dealt with similar things through life and experienced the world similarly to us and different from us, right? And a lot of these two, the reason I harp on these two things is because they get lost in a lot of the crypto art conversations. And I don't think it's because people don't love and value art or making art. I think it's because what's novel about the blockchain and crypto art communities to most people, right, is that here's this new way. So many of us could never find anyone to buy our work before. And now magically, like manna from the gods, there are collectors that are willing to buy my work when no one ever paid attention to me before. And that feels damn good, So that's back to the financial aspect of it, right? But I think part of what Bea is saying is that in addition to the financial aspects, we need to experiment and try new things on the social sides that address actually the two more important definitions of what makes art important, which is how it makes us feel when we create it and how we're able to change people's lives by the way that we communicate through it. And those things are getting drowned out a little bit right now around the talk around money. It's interesting, I'll just say real quickly that, I often reference my mom as sort of my emotional true north, right? And she's like, you don't seem like anyone who's ever cared about finance and money at all. Like, why is it that you're like, what's your obsession with this blockchain stuff? And it seems like it's just drawing all these artists into like promoting themselves nonstop. And like I don't even hear you talk about people's art as art anymore. Just talk about it as like, who's selling what, where, or whatever. And she has a point, but my defense would be, it's also, artists have suffered for hundreds of years because we've been told that we're not supposed to talk about money, right? It's like it's a taboo. We're supposed to be altruistic and just be poor or find other jobs. Like, we're not supposed to talk about the fact that we can't like make enough money off of what we're passionate about building to survive. So that's why, although I do think it's awkward to talk so much about art and money, I continue to be part of this community and kind of try to push for, new systems and experimental systems. And the last thing I would say around that is I I have no disagreement with anything that Dada is building in its current stage or in its previous stage. I think it's beautiful. I actually just think we need more experimentation, right? So I think there's no one system, no matter how much faith I have in all the folks that are working on, the current version of Dada. It's not realistic to expect that any one system get it right. So what we need is a wider variety of systems to increase our chances that that something will pop out right. So that's why when artists are like, well, you're friends with Super Rare, but they don't let everyone in, so they're not fully decentralized. I'm like, yeah, but I think Rarible does, right? And they're like, yeah, but things don't sell for as much on Rarible. I'm like, well, that's probably because they let everyone in, right? So we're watching all these unfold, and that's beautiful. Like, that we need, and so with every, I thought for a long time that, man, these platforms are dumb. Every artist should just be able to tokenize their own work because it's completely decentralized. The platforms are just like bankers. Well, it turns out if nobody's going to buy your artwork in real, like, everyday life, tokenizing it means nothing, right?
Yes, exactly.
Promotion. So here's another word. We don't like talking about finance because it's dirty and artists aren't supposed to talk about it. We also don't like talking about marketing. Artists aren't supposed to market themselves. I just said I hate that they market themselves nonstop on Twitter. But you have to, I think the reason why Super Rare and these other platforms work and the money comes in and the collectors come in is because they're doing the marketing for the artists, right? Mm-hmm. So you're either going to
that's so true. No, that's so true. That's actually not true. Artists have to do their marketing. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest problems. I mean, so we have to, there's so much to unpack there, though. But one of the things, talking about decentralization, that I think is interesting is that all of the platforms are actually centralized, all of them, including Dada, right? And there's a need for that. You can't just go and decentralize, and we have to create the environment to do that. But what I think is interesting is that platforms are decentralizing the things that are actually, that I think platforms should be taking on. So I think platforms should be taking on the marketing and the promotion. I'm in Super Rare. I don't have social media. I don't do any marketing or actually tokenize my first piece in Known Origin today. And there's no marketing whatsoever that I'm going to do, and that's fine. But the platforms don't do that for you. And so if you're an artist, who cares me? I don't need it, really. But if you're a new artist and you don't have the network and you don't have people in the community, how are you going to sell anything? So the platforms don't do that, and it's even interesting because I think async is decentralizing the marketing in a way that it's like, okay, we have ambassadors, and so you deal with them, you negotiate the commission of the people who want to do the marketing. We don't want to deal with that. So the same actually with conflict. When there is conflict and and people are being abused, the platforms are saying, you solve it between yourself. Don't put me in the position to having to do anything. And so it's centralized, the platforms are pretty much the privilege and the advantages of being centralized, but taking no responsibility for the things that actually are important. They're decentralizing those. And so, basically leaving the artist on its own. And so that's something to really consider, because I don't think the success of Super Rare or Rarible, which, I think it's great. I'm not... I love the Super Rare guys. I love the Known Origin guys. I want them to do good. It's not about that. It's that they're just basically working within a system. There's a formula for that. And they're following this formula, and that's okay. But the problem that I have is that then let's not say that it's innovative or new, and let's not say that it's good for artists. It's going to be really good for a few amount of artists. But the problem that I see with people coming into the space that are thinking in the expectations that now everyone can buy their work, it's not true. It's not true, and then you're even more vulnerable, because artists are in a vulnerable position, and they're even more vulnerable because you have to do all this marketing and all this promotion in Twitter, and they don't really know how to do it. It's like all like this, and it's just hard. It makes it really hard. And so, we have to see the reality of what's happening, and we tend to focus, just like in Silicon Valley, they tend to focus on the few startups that made it to be unicorns, and out of the 99% that fail, what we're seeing in the ecosystem is a lot of people failing, but we just don't hear about them.
But Bea,
a lot of people feeling abused.
Bea, this balance between the most popular or successful artists and the vast majority, I don't believe this is something that's particular of the crypto art or the art scene in general. I think this is more of a human phenomena. Like I think this I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to address it if we believe is wrong. Definitely everything that we believe that we should that we could fix of society, we should try to fix it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that perhaps you're trying to address more something that is more concerning about a human problem in general. It's not about crypto.
What do you mean? Like, what do you mean human problem? Let's
well,
define.
In any human endeavor, it's just a small percentage, the ones that get all the attention or all the money or all the land.
Okay, so let's deconstruct that. It's not a human nature thing. It's a system thing. It's a market thing. So every market works that way, and crypto art market works that way. And so, but I'm not saying, I'm not here to bring capitalism down. That's not my issue. I'm here to build an alternative to that. But what I'm saying is we cannot expect crypto art to produce anything different when we're using exactly the same system. And the opportunity that we have is that we can actually change it and fine-tune it and change and experiment, like Jason is saying, in a million ways. We couldn't do that before. And so to me, an important thing is, it's not as human nature. It's not. It's actually not. That's 50 years of research saying that our society is basically built with the wrong incentives, and so for human nature actually, and so. So if we can at least change that mindset and say, okay, so it could be different, at least it could be different. It's not human nature. It doesn't have to be competitive. It doesn't have to be speculative. It doesn't have to. It's not that my ideas are radical. If you think a little bit different from what you know, it's just common sense. Because if you actually listen to what we want to do every day as humans, you just want to do the things that you like to do, and you want to do it when you want to and feel like it, and follow your curiosity, and deadlines are a drag.
I think we are losing you a little bit. Bea, can you make a small pause? I think we are losing you over there. Okay. Yeah, it just went off your sound for a moment. Let's try again.
Okay. Sorry about
you were saying. Yeah. Well, okay. So, what I'm getting from what you just said, yeah, definitely. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I'm just seeing a pattern in not just in humans. I mean, in the natural kingdom. But I'm not saying that we shouldn't try to balance out these patterns for the sake of a more fair society. I mean, and I'm completely on board in trying to build these issues in defense of some of the platforms that are outside of data. I believe that they are bringing something very important, and is the right place for galleries, because as Jason mentioned, at some point we believe that with blockchain we would not need galleries at all. Right? Artists can just buy and sell peer-to-peer with their collectors. And that's not the case, because we definitely need, so I mean, I'm not good at marketing. Well, I get an advantage by publishing on Super Rare, right? And but they are getting just the fair share, in my opinion, because if you don't like it, you just go to other platforms, right? So if artists and collectors feel that the platform is taking too much of a cut, they just don't use it. So I believe that they are giving a nice and a good.
Yeah, but you don't have options, though. The reality is that you don't have option as an artist. You have 3, 4 options. They all take some cut, depending. They have their own benefits, but you don't really have an option. And so, and we're still in the model of an extractivist model, a model where it extracts value from artists. Where, in the case of the galleries that vet artists, extract power from artists. And when you see it in that sense, it's got nothing to do with human nature. I mean, it's systems, and we are creating these systems. We are designing these systems. And so it's interesting to see that in the case of the curated galleries, artists are actually the ones that are the most disempowered. And that is just a fact. So it's not a fact of life that artists are poor because they don't know how to make money or they don't like money. No, it's a fact of the artists are poor because the system makes artists to be poor and extract the little value that there is from them. And we're just repeating that. And so, you know, we have to take responsibility of the systems that we create, especially in this ecosystem. Because if you say, well, I see that in natural world, well, the natural world, I've been, you know, really thinking about this. Competition, for instance, in the natural world, is always have to do with scarcity, always. But we live in a highly technological society in which scarcity is manufactured. So why are we still having these systems? Right? So we have to question all of those beliefs. Can we create? Can we make systems and make ecosystems and communities that are based in different values? Because we don't need all of that anymore. It's manufactured.
Okay, so let me try to phrase a question that in a different way. Yeah, and it's for both of you. So if we take for granted that we operate in a system that works in behalf of some and in detriment of others, so what would you say makes the difference between an artist and someone that is not an artist? Like the specific question would be, maybe Jason, you could go first. Do you think that to be an artist, you just need to identify as an artist, or there are some specific things that you need to do to be entitled as an artist? And therefore, we can elaborate on who's abusing who, right?
Yeah, so I think there's a special handshake that you have to learn to become an artist. My parents, my dad, who I think tends to be kind of blunt sometimes, after I had finished undergrad, a few times had mentioned that he thought that art school actually wrecked me as an artist, right? Because it just it's another institution that pulls you further away from doing what comes naturally. And I tend to agree in that we're all artists on some level, and we'd all like more opportunity to explore and create things. And some of us get the opportunity to practice that craft and spend more time on it and go deeper, and produce more work, or work that can go a little bit further along. And some of us aren't lucky enough to get that opportunity, right? And we find ways to squeeze in a minute here or there to get some creative expression in, periodically. So I think anyone can be an artist. Now, when it comes to again, it's important to me to consistently keep these definitions of financial success and emotional or artistic success, both from the collector's side and the artist side separately. I've got artist friends on, Super Rare and Rareable that will ping me and DM me and say like, oh, this one was a flop. No one bought this. It must not be good, right? And I often say, and I love those platforms. Actually, a quick defense of that. I think because you're not on Twitter as much, Bea, those guys do actually do a ton of intervention, like pretty craftily, like and carefully with so many disputes. I mean, I could see that they are trying to move away from it. But one of the reasons I've never tried to make a platform is because I couldn't. There's no way I could deal with all the disputes and all of that stuff. So I think they're earning their money, but I don't want to get stuck on that point, because my larger point was that these people that think, oh, my work didn't sell on Super Rare, or my work didn't sell on Rareable, it must not have been good. For someone like me, it's almost always the opposite, right? So the work is challenging and it's interesting and it's different, right? So it's not selling because it's challenging. And no knock to the cryptocurrency community, but there's not like if you're going to be into Bitcoin and Ethereum, you somehow magically have a really deep background or history in art. It's often the case that like comic book superheroes or things like that sell for like, $100,000, and people are like, well, is my art bad then if it's not selling for $100,000? These are honest, like, artists have been making work for decades, and I'm like, no, you just can't put your entire self-concept and confidence in whether or not this one small subculture is going to buy your work or not, right? So the same way at every level and every aspect, on every question, and every time we look at these things, I think we need to separate as collectors and artists financial success and sort of artistic or emotional success, and they're very different. And that's sort of, gosh, you mentioned that article. I usually don't plug my articles, but that's what I'm trying to get across. I think Bea and I overlap on this too, around abundance, right? Is that make more and more and more and more, and that's the way to get better. If you're trying to get more financial success or more artistic success, the scarcity is the enemy, because you learn by doing more, right? Making more, and you can get more collectors if you can support more people, because you get your work out in front of more people. So it's not this idea that you're supposed to like do the exact right work, like based on what's already sold, and somehow that's going to make you successful. I think is ridiculous. You'd rob yourself and collectors of the good work there is out there to be made. Longer answer than you probably wanted, but we're all artists.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything.
You agree?
Yeah, I agree. And I love your mom, by the way. Like, you always, everything that you say about your mom, what you mentioned before, she's so right, always. What I was gonna say is, I forgot. You say so many things.
I say too many things. It's true.
No, so many good things. There were so many good things.
One of the things that I would say then, we all at least have the potential of doing art. We were born, I believe humans are naturally creative, and then as you said, Jason and Bea, sometimes the systems and the structures constrain you in certain ways that cuts your creativity, and that's something that we need to unleash, right? That we need to thrive. One of the things that I would like to mention about the excitement that you guys talked about earlier in the conversation is that for a lot of artists, the monetary incentive is very exciting, and it's also a drive for creativeness. I know it might clash with some of our ideas, but that's what I'm seeing, because I also believe that there's definitely an experience at creating art for the sake of doing it, and for your own well-being and for the people that you care about. That's I'm entirely convinced about that. But also the excitement that you're going to get paid and you're going to pay your bills this month by creating art. That's also a very strong drive that is not necessarily a wrong, right?
Well, it's actually pretty bad. It's actually pretty bad for art. It's exactly how Jason says. It produces bad art. It produces formulaic art. It produces art that looks to satisfy an audience. And the things, of course, people are going to be excited. We're all going to be excited if we're making money. If we don't have any ways of making money with what we do, it's obviously, but we have to pass that, because the danger that we're in right now is that, again, at the moment that you change that drive to do your own thing and experiment, and that beautiful thing that you feel that Jason was talking about when you're making art, that value disappears. Because your mind, and this is research, right? This is behavioral science. Your mind narrow focuses on cells. It just narrow focuses there. And that's when your mind, and this is true for all of us, that's when your mind goes into, okay, so what can I sell in super rare or in rarible? What would collectors like there? Or what would, right? Then I will go into gift instead of the thing that I want to do, really. So because the only goal is to sell. And so that's a big driver. And everything else goes out the window. And that is research, right? That is the worst thing that could happen to an artist is actually to be focused on money, making rent. And ideally, we could live in a society where there is some kind of basic income, or you don't even want to say income anymore, but some kind of security in which people can actually develop their talents in intrinsic ways. But now I remember what I wanted to say before, and I just forgot again. This is something that you were saying about selling. I forgot.
Okay, so if it's possible to make a division between the art that you produce just for the sake of selling and the art that you produce for the sake, if it's possible to make that line, it would be necessary to draw a line between what's propaganda, what's merchandising, and what's art, pure art, right? And that's I believe a topic for a different for another conversation, because it's a very philosophical and wide topic.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't have to, right? Like, just to know that, and to me, it's simple. Art, it's whoever has the impulse to express something through any materials, because you can use anything in the form of art. Whoever does it, that's art for me. Now, not everyone can make art. Not everyone is an artist, right? Everyone can play the guitar. Not everyone is Hendrix. And that's a different thing. But anyone can make art. And so that pleasure in itself, I don't need to, deconstruct it, whether it's good art or bad art. It's enough that it's art and people are doing it. But I think it's important when the mindset changes into selling, because what I remember now, what I've been trying to say is that the problem, related to the promotion, Jason, is that to me, if making a living is dependent on promoting yourself, that's a really hard, thing on artists. Because right now, and this is true in the entire world, but it's true also in the crypto art ecosystem, your capacity to sell is dependent on that promotion that you do. And so I think, well, if you're an artist, you shouldn't at all be dependent, your actually ability to make a living, into how well you can promote yourself. And so, because we're creating now this ecosystem of influencers, and it's like, can we just like think different, be a little more imaginative?
Guys, we're already over an hour here. So if you have any closing thoughts, now's the time. And maybe at the end, I will just close the conversation. So I don't know, Bea, you go ahead.
I can go. I'm usually the one raining on everyone's parade, but I'm also still extremely excited about the ecosystem. Like, I'm extremely excited about the possibilities. So this is not necessarily just a blind criticism on what's happening. It's more a call to action, to see the realities, not to deny them, just to see the realities, so that we can all, as an ecosystem, experiment more and towards bringing the potential of what we all, brought us all here in the first place. And the potential is still there. It's incredible and it's amazing. And if we just stop thinking that this is the only way of doing things and start looking at the actual technology and what we could do, and play with it, I think that we'll be amazed of what we could do.
Jason? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think to sort of echo that, the only reason we're as critical as we are of the space is because we care about it so much, right? You don't put this much energy and thought and passion and emotion and debate into a thing you don't care about, right? So I think we had crypto art when it was a toddler, and we all put our own visions on it as to what it was going to grow up and become. And we were able to get along with each other, even though we had different visions, because we're like, well, my vision will be the one that comes, to when it grows up and moves out of the house or whatever. And now that, crypto art's a teenager for a lot of us, we're like, ugh, it's like, is that what happened, on some of the things, and on other things, it's really remarkable, right? So you look at, to me, one of the things that I cite, I was lucky. I was the guy that was given a lot of resources. I got to go to art school twice, and I spent most of my life around artists and musicians, right? And despite spending most of my life around artists, I only ever knew one person. My wife's friend's dad was a political cartoonist, was the only person I ever met who made a living off of making art. Even the professors that I had all had other jobs, teaching and things like that, right? So no one was just making art. In the last year, I now know around the world, dozens and dozens of people that are making a living making their art on Rarible, super rare, known origin. And it can seem like we're recreating where it's only just a few people. But I think when you're in, and Gus, you agree with me or disagree with me, I know it's sort of ended, and so we can't open up the debate again. But if you're in Discord, which I'm not as much in, or Twitter, or any one of these things, you really start to, I think, sense and feel it, that it's not really just one or two people, that there's actually quite a spectrum and dozens of people that are learning from each other how to make some sort of meaningful income relative to where they had made none before. And that can get lost in this sort of clarion call that Bea and I both have for more experimentation and things that we don't like about what's going on. But remarkable things are happening, and hopefully increasingly remarkable things will happen if we can get more experimentation.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. What we all agree is that the ecosystem is amazing, is exciting. Just to be clear, when I mention about a small amount of people that are getting all the money, like I'm talking about, let's say, the big names that are making more than $100,000 for a sale. Those are very few, but most of the people that are in the crypto art scene, they're getting a pretty decent revenue, right? So maybe just a few are getting. What I see from the artists that I talk to and I get to know, I mean, they say they sell way more through crypto art than they were doing before. That's
but I need to clarify that point though, because it's like I've heard Jason saying that before as well, that you have friends now, many friends artists who are making a living, and it's true. I mean, me too. But it's like in Venezuela, in the socialist economy, there is a new class of people that are new but rich, right? And I'm sure if you ask within that circle, they will say, well, none of these people will have money before in the old system. But what changed, it was just some people changed, and now it's a new set of people. But the system in itself didn't change. And so that's what I see, is it's early enough. And this is, I think, an important point to close. Even when we did the analysis for the secondary markets, Massimo, who did the data analysis, he said there is an artist domination in the actual wealth creation because you're asking the wrong questions. You're just looking around your friends and the only people, the small subset. But we have to see the patterns and we have to see the system. And when you see the system, you see extreme inequality. And that extreme inequality is just going to continue exponentially. So if now 60 artists are benefiting because it's so early, next year there will be 5, right? And that's what we need to really think about, and so that we can actually do something before it happens.
Then the Twitter poll would agree with you, Bea. So that's why I started with, what I see isn't what everyone sees. I think Gus and I came in at a time where we developed new friends that are benefiting from it. that is exciting. But 130 people that I polled on Twitter, more than half would say that it's pretty much either slightly or not really all that different from the art market, traditional art market.
Yeah. We can do something. We can do something. There is enough.
Yeah, and I think we are doing. I mean, you for above all, Bea, I think you're doing a great job, and you're successful at building a community that are driven by these common values, and that's amazing. I'm really honored to have you explaining to us your perspective. And also you, Jason, I'm super grateful for having you here. So just to close, I think we've seen at least two approaches of what things are playing out for the communities and platforms in the crypto art scene, and all involve legacy systems combined with new technology and ideas. I believe that more than ever, there's room for everyone. So I definitely encourage everyone that is listening to get involved in this exciting revolution that is happening, and to be actively participating in the building of new communities. So thank you again. Thank you all the guys from Bit Basel. We are super excited to be here, and take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Hagas.